Hello everyone, it's Glenda and welcome back to Creative Grandma. Today's crochet tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this simple slipper. Now this slipper tutorial today will be just a basic one size fits most for an adult between a size 6 to maybe a 7.5 to 8. Because we're crocheting in rows, this is really going to stretch and can fit many different sizes. But I'm also going to show you how to come up with your own custom measurements so you know how to make your own size for your own foot. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to measure your foot and come up with your measurements. So first, I want to say a special thank you to Lion Brand Yarns for sending me the yarn to make these slippers. I chose Feels Like Butter because it's an excellent, very soft, cushiony yarn for making slippers, and it's wash and dryable, which is wonderful because we're wearing them on our floors, getting the bottoms dirty. You want to be able to throw them in a washer and dryer and get those slippers clean. Now you're going to need one skein of a main color, and you're going to need one skein of a contrasting color, and I chose red and white for my slipper, and you can choose whichever color you wish. Now you only need one skein, the smaller skein of the Feels Like Butter. Let me give you the information. It's 3.5 ounces, 100 grams, 218 yards, 199 meters, and it's a 4 medium weight yarn. It is 100% polyester, so it's very, very soft, and I chose color number 1138 red. Now my white skein is really big. You don't need a skein this big, but they do have them in two different sizes. You only need the small 3.5 ounces, but if you wanted to make a lot of slippers, then you can also buy the larger 9.7 ounces, but you only need one small skein of your contrasting color, which I chose the color white. You're also going to need a size H8 or 5 millimeter crochet hook for this project. Now for this tutorial, I am doing the basic size of one size fits most, and I'm going to say this will fit a woman's size 6 to probably a 7.5, maybe even up to an 8. So if you want to learn how to customize your own slipper, you're going to need a pencil. You're going to need a tape measure that wraps around your foot, and you're also going to need a sheet of paper to draw your foot. So if you don't want to learn how to do that, then just go ahead and skip ahead to where we just start crocheting the slipper. So let me get started on explaining how to do your own custom sizes for your slippers. The best way to get started on trying to figure out custom sizes, if you have children or your husband or even yourself, is just let them place their foot on a sheet of paper. Then you're going to trace around their foot. And then once you have this measurement, then you're going to use this to figure out the size of your rectangle. So first, after you draw their foot on paper, take their foot. You're going to take your tape measure, and you want to measure around the pad of their foot, right up between the end of their toes and right as your foot is coming down. So go ahead and measure. So for this foot, I'm getting 7.5 inches. So I'm going to write 7.5 inches across. And this is the width of your rectangle. Now you need the actual foot to get this measurement because you're going up over the foot and you can't get that from here. Now you're going to measure for your length, and this says it's about 8.25 inches long, and this is your length. Now, I never use the exact measurements because what happens is if you use the exact measurements, your slipper can actually get too big because of the yarn stretching if you make it the same exact size. So I usually drop my measurements down a 1/2 inch. So you're going to minus a 1/2 inch, or you're going to round it off to 8 inches. So here I took 7.5. I'm going to drop it down to 7 inches. I want 7 inches across for my width. So now my finished measurement is going to be 7 inches across, and my length I'm going to drop down to 8 inches. So for this tutorial, I'm actually making the slipper for my little sample foot here. So my end results is you're going to have a rectangle, and it's going to be 7 inches across by 8 inches long. And that is how you figure out your measurements for your slipper. So now for today's tutorial, I'm just going to draw my rectangle. So we want it 7 inches across by 8 inches long. So once you have this rectangle, you can do anything you want in this rectangle. You can use a different stitch pattern. You can change it in any way you wish. Now for me, I decided to do my toe area. So what I did is I just took my foot here and I measured about 2.5 inches because you're going to lose a little bit here when you work in those row end stitches. So it's only going to come to be about 2 1/4. So I come down 2.5 inches for my toe area. And this is how I designed my slipper. I just wanted that toe area to be, you know, a little different than the rest of my slipper. So this is the actual rectangle. But if you don't want to do the toe area differently and it's the first time that you've ever made a slipper, you can make this slipper in one solid piece of just doing the single crochet. You just have to make sure that your rectangle is the measurements that you got off your first paper. You just have to make sure that it's 7 inches across by 8 inches long. So again, you don't have to do the toe area, but in the tutorial, I'm showing you how to do the toe area. If you don't want to do the toe area, then you would skip to where I start crocheting my stitches across. You would use the same number for this size and just increase your rows until you got to the 8 inches. So all kinds of possibilities. Again, you can use a shell stitch as long as your beginning chain equals your measurements. You can do any crochet stitch pattern as long as you're using the measurements of that stitch pattern being the width and the length of the rectangle. And you have to try to make sure that if you want to design your own slippers, you're using a pattern that's easy to put and seam together. So I hope that explains how to do custom sizes. Again, just make sure you're dropping the actual size down just about a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch so you get a better fit on that slipper. So now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get started making our slipper. To begin our project, I already have my red yarn attached to my hook and I just used a double knot. You can use whichever method you prefer, and we're going to begin and chain 11. You're going to yarn over the hook, pull it through the loop, and that creates your first chain. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Now we're ready to begin row 1. We're going to skip the first chain, work a single crochet into the second chain, and in each chain across to the last chain. So when you get to the last chain, you're going to stop and I'll show you how to change colors. So let's begin. You're going to skip the first chain, insert into the second chain, work a single crochet. Insert into the next chain, work a single crochet. Insert into the next chain, work a single crochet. So now I'm just going to go ahead and work one single crochet in each chain across to that last chain. And when you get to the last chain, we're going to change colors before we pull that last loop through. Again, you're going to work one single crochet in each chain across. So now I'm over at my last chain and I'm going to insert my hook into the last chain. I'm going to yarn over with the red and pull it through. And now I'm going to attach my white, but what I'm going to do is I'm keeping both strands of yarn and I'm just going to carry them on the back of my work and change colors at the end of each row. So let me join my white. I'm just going to join it with a knot. You can join your yarn however way you wish, and I leave a little bit longer length because I like to be able to use the yarn needle to weave in that end so you can't see it. And then I just pull that white down, and then you're going to finish your stitch with the white. So yarn over with the white and then pull it through the 2 loops on your hook, and you can see how the top of the stitch is finished in the red and then the white begins the next row. So now, since we're at the end of row 1, you should have a total of 10 single crochet stitches. Because we worked in the second chain, you lose one of your stitches. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches. So now we're going to go ahead and begin row 2. Now we'll be working the same stitch pattern with each row, only we'll be changing colors each row. We're going to chain 1 and work 1 single crochet in each single crochet in the white, and then at the end of the row we're going to change back to red and then repeat row 2. So let's begin. You're going to chain 1 and you're going to turn your work. You're going to bring your red strand of yarn up. You want to bring it up crosswise, and you're going to insert your hook right on the left side of that strand of yarn. Work a single crochet. And you're just keeping that red right on top of your work, and we're crocheting right over that strand of red because we need our red to be at this side when we start the next row. Insert into the next stitch. Work underneath that strand of red, work a single crochet. Work 1 single crochet in each stitch across, making sure you're carrying that red right across the work with you. Again, you're working 1 single crochet in each stitch across. So I'm almost over to the end. Now, if you're new to crocheting, you may want to put a stitch marker in your first and last stitch of each row. So when you do the next row, you're going to know where your first and last stitch is. So I'm over at my last stitch. Make sure you're going under both loops of that stitch. You're going to yarn over with the white, pull through that last stitch, and then you're going to bring your red up, drop your white, bring your red strand of yarn up, yarn over, and pull through. And you'll see how it finishes the top of the last stitch in white and starts your new row with the red. So now we're at the end of row 2, and you should have a total of 10 stitches. 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Your stitch count will not change. You ended that last stitch with the top is white, and then your next loop is red to start the next row. So now we're going to go ahead and chain 1 with the red. You're going to turn your work. You're going to grab your white yarn and you're going to bring it up to the top of your work. So bring it right up to the top of your work, right to the edge. Insert on the left side of that strand of yarn and under the top 2 loops of that first stitch. And then you're going to work a single crochet with the red and you're working right over that strand of white yarn. And again, we're going to carry that white yarn right across your work. Insert into the next stitch, work a single crochet. Insert into the next stitch, you're going under both of those top loops and you're going underneath that strand of white yarn and you're just going to carry it across your work. And we're just going to work across to the end of the row. So now we're over to our last stitch. Again, I'm going to show you how to change colors. You're going to insert under the top 2 loops of that last stitch, go underneath that strand of white, yarn over with the red, pull it through that last stitch. You have 2 red loops on your hook. You're going to drop your red, grab your white yarn, yarn over with the white, and pull through the 2 loops. So again, you have a total of 10 stitches. You ended with red on top of the last stitch and you have a white loop on your hook to start the next row. So now all you're going to do is click back on the video, repeat rows 2 and row 3 until you have a total of 26 rows. So go ahead and work rows 2 and 3 until you have a total of 26 rows. I'll be back and then we'll continue. I'm over at the end of row 26. This is what your work should look like. This is the wrong side where we carried our yarn up on the side, and then when you turn it over, this is the right side of our work. Now I'm just going to finish that last stitch using all white. I'm not pulling the red through because we're at the end of row 26. So you're going to yarn over, pull through in the same color, and then you're going to fasten off. And again, I like to use a longer length because I like to really have a lot of yarn to weave in with my needle. It gives you more room to maneuver that needle around. And now I'm just going to take and insert my hook right here underneath that last stitch, and I'm just going to fasten off my red. I just fastened off both my colors and we're on the wrong side of the work. So now we're going to start working down our row end stitches. So now what we're going to do is you're going to turn your work. So when you turn your work, your ends where you fastened off will be in the top right hand corner, and where you started on the right side, your ends where you started your chain are going to be on the bottom left. So I have my red. We're going to begin with our red. I have it attached to my hook and I just used a double knot. So we're going to go up and join our red in the top left hand corner, the last stitch of the last row worked. So make sure that where you tied off is in the top right corner. Follow that last row over to that last stitch, and then we're going to join right in the top of this last stitch. So insert right underneath the top 2 loops. You're going to yarn over, pull through that stitch, and pull through the loop on your hook, and then just tighten that up. And it just makes a nicer join because you're going through that loop and it really secures your yarn. You're going to chain 1. You're going to go back into that same first row end stitch, work a single crochet. Yarn over, pull through, you have 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. You just made your first single crochet. Now we're going to work 1 single crochet in each row end stitch down the length of our strip. And it's very easy to see because each row end stitch is a different color. Insert into the next row end stitch, work a single crochet. Insert into the next row end stitch, work a single crochet. Insert into the next row end stitch, work a single crochet. So go ahead and continue and work 1 single crochet in each row end stitch down to the next corner, and I'll meet you there. I just worked 1 single crochet in each row end stitch down my length, and when you get to the last row end stitch and work that last stitch, you're going to have a total of 26 single crochet down the length of your strip. Now, because you're working in the row end stitches, it's going to stretch the top of the strip. So if you have a little bit of bowing in your strip, that's going to be normal because this is stretched and this end is not. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and start row 2. We're going to chain 1 and you're going to turn your work. You're going to skip the beginning chain 1, insert into that very first stitch, work a single crochet. Single crochet into the next stitch. Single crochet into the next stitch. You're going to continue and work 1 single crochet in each stitch across to the end of the row. So go ahead and work 1 single crochet in each stitch across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 2. I'm over at the end of row 2. My stitch count is the same. You're going to have a total of 26 single crochet across your work. So now to finish your rectangle, you're just going to repeat row 2 26 more times for a total of 28 single crochet rows going down the rest of our rectangle. So go ahead and repeat row 2 26 more times, and I'll meet you at the end of row 28. I'm over at the end of row 28. Now, if you're making a custom slipper, I did forget to mention when you're making your strip for your toe area, if you need to make that longer, then adjust the pattern so you're starting with that red row, but you're ending with the white. So when you put that together, it keeps the same pattern. You don't want white on white. You want to make sure that you start with red and end with white if you're making a custom size. Now, when you're making a custom size, you're going to do the same thing we did with this pattern. And if you have a longer toe strip, if you're making a custom slipper, then all you would do is put 1 single crochet in each row end stitch down, and then you're going to single crochet until you get to the length of your custom size that you need. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to fasten off, and you want to fasten off leaving a longer length. You want a sewing length. So I think I'm going to leave, I don't know, about 15 inches. That's way too much, but I rather have too much than not enough. So when I fasten off, I just chain 2. 1, 2, pull my hook up, pull my yarn out, grab the yarn, pinch, pull down, and it creates a secure knot. Now you can use whichever method you prefer to fasten off your slipper. So our rectangle is made. We're done with row 28, and now we fastened off. So now what you're going to do is you're going to leave your work exactly here where you fastened off, and you're just going to take a yarn needle, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention you needed a yarn needle in the material list, and we're just going to thread our yarn that we fastened off onto our needle. And now we're going to form the heel of our slipper. So where you fastened off will be on the top left. So all you're going to do is take your right corner, your top right corner, and you're going to fold it over to meet your left corner where you fastened off. And then we're going to sew down across our slipper to form our heel. So when you fold your slipper, you want to try to match your stitches going from one side to the other down until you get to the bottom. So let me zoom up just a little bit more so you can get really up close and see. So this is the first stitch, so I'm just going to take my yarn needle over on the other side, and I'm going in the outside loop of the stitch. Here's the inside, here's the outside. Here is the outside, here is the inside down in there. So every time you see a stitch, it's like a teardrop. We're only going in the outside because we want to pull this together and you don't want to see a seam there. So go in the outside loop and then bring it over and match it to the outside loop of that first stitch, and we're just going to sew down our slipper. Go back over to the outside loop of the next stitch. Now this red yarn might be a little bit hard to see. Insert into the outside loop of the stitch on the other side, and we're just going to continue sewing down our slipper. Take your needle over to the outside loop on the other side and bring it back through the outside loop on this side. Make sure you get that loop over there. Just pull it snug and just continue sewing down the slipper. And again, try to match up those stitches from one side to the other the best you can, just to give it a nicer look. Now when you get down at the bottom, it's a little bit harder to match those stitches, but I'm just going right into the last stitch and right over on the other side, and I'm just going to pull that together. And when I get to the bottom, I like to do it twice. I like to go back into that stitch and then bring it back over. And before I pull that through, I keep a loop and then I pull it through and knot my yarn. And you can see how it just makes your heel look so much nicer. You really don't see the seam in your slipper. And now what you're going to do is you're just going to take your yarn needle down through your work onto the wrong side. Just pull that through there. And then I knot it again on the wrong side. I just take it through any stitch. I form a loop, take my yarn needle through the loop, pull it tight, and then I weave it through the wrong side of the stitches. I would say I go through maybe 6 stitches just underneath the stitches, pull it, and then you want to come back, because usually slippers are really worn hard. You wear them all the time, so you really want your end to be nice and secure. And then I just come back through. And if you have a long strand like mine, you can always go through a third time and really secure that yarn. And then we're just going to clip that off. And then the heel of your slipper is formed. So now our heel is formed. You want to have your slipper to where the heel is at the top. So that's the heel. I just bent it down. And now we're going down to the left-hand corner, the bottom left-hand corner. So you're going to need a long sewing length, and now we're going to go ahead and form the toe area. We're going to go down into that bottom corner. So if you just turn your work upside down to where here's the heel, and then here's the toe area, we're going to start and weave in and out through the very edge of each stitch across. So let me zoom up just a little bit closer. And you're not going to tie a knot. You're just going to leave a little bit of a length when you start and work into the very edge stitch, and you're only going under one strand of yarn of each stitch. So I'm just going to pull my yarn through, and you want to keep a little bit longer length here. So don't pull that all the way through. And then you're just going to go in and out, and you're going under just the edge stitch of each stitch. So just go under only one loop. So you go in one side and out the other. And we're just weaving our way across to the other end of that toe area. Now I'm not pulling tight, I'm just doing a loose weave, and then we'll pull it tight when we're all finished and we get to the other end. We're almost to the end, and again you're just going to continue weaving in and out, going through only one loop of yarn right at the very edge of each row end stitch down to that corner. So I'm over at the corner. This is what it looks like. Let me zoom out just a little more. So you have an end here and you have an end on this side. So I'm just going to pull, and then you're going to pull on this side, and then it's going to get kind of bulky. So just use your fingers and try to pull it and gather it so it's not getting, you know, like one big clump all at the same place. So I'm just going to turn this so you can see better, and then I'm just going to pull it, and I'm going to pull it tight until you see that you're down at the bottom and your hole is getting smaller. So I keep pulling until it really becomes almost impossible to see any hole. So there I have it pulled tight pretty good, and now I'm just going to tie a knot. And you're just going to pull until you see that that opening is nice and closed. Once you see there's no opening there, then you're just going to tie another knot and secure that. Then what I do is I take the string of yarn that has my needle on, and I'm going to poke it right through the center of that hole onto the wrong side of my slipper. So this end I'm just going to leave here for now. And now I'm going to turn my slipper, and I'm going to push this so I'm on the wrong side. And what I like to do is I like to do a cross stitch. I'll grab a couple stitches. 1 or 2 stitches is plenty. Just try to grab them, and this is going to be really tight. You really have to work to get those stitches. So I pull through those. And then I'm going to go over to the other side and go over under 1 or 2 loops of yarn, and then I just pull that tight, and it just helps close that opening up and really secure it. And then I'm just going to do that again to close that up. And then I like to go the other way. I like to just grab a couple different stitches. Don't use the same stitches. I'm going down here, grab those 2 stitches, and then I just come up here and grab 2 stitches. And then I'm just going to grab 1 stitch, and then I'm going to pull up a loop. And then I just take my needle through that loop, and I pull tight, and it helps knot that yarn. And it just helps secure the toe area better. This end, the smaller end that I'm not using, I'm just going to keep that on the wrong side here, and I'll weave that in later. So now what you want to do is, this is the wrong side. We just did our little X, secured that opening. So what you want to do is keep it on the wrong side and just turn your slipper and we're going to sew up the side where we need to close up the toe area. So you're just going to bend that forward, and we're going to match these stitches, and we're just going to sew across this opening, and then we're going to continue and sew up 8 row end stitches up here. And if you're doing a custom slipper, then when you get to this part, you may have to sew up a little farther, or if it's a smaller slipper, a little less. It just all depends on the size slipper that you're making. So for this slipper here, we're going to start, and again, this is the wrong side. So let me zoom up so you can really see what I'm doing. I'm going under both of the top loops of each stitch. So I'm going to start over on this side, and I'm going under both of those top 2 loops, and I'm coming over and I'm going under both of the top 2 loops of this stitch over here, matching those stitches. And I'm just going to sew across. Then I'm going under the next stitch. I'm just going under both of those top 2 loops, and then you're going to match it up with the stitch on the opposite side, going under the top 2 loops. And we're just going to sew right up this edge, matching stitches from side to side. So let's continue. Go under the top 2 loops of the stitch on the opposite side and bring it back to this side, going under the top 2 loops of that same matching stitch on the opposite side, and just continue working across your slipper. And what I like to do is, as I'm working, I just kind of butt those last 2 stitches up, because you don't want to be sewing and then find out when you get to the end, if you're not paying attention, it doesn't line up. So you can either put a stitch marker in there and hold that together, but I usually like to just pinch it with my fingers as I go and keep an eye on it. And you really want that to match up so you have a nicer looking slipper. So again, you're going under the top 2 loops of the one stitch on the one side, match it up to the top 2 loops of the matching stitch on the other side, and just continue working in that fashion. And then every few stitches, I make sure I check my stitches, make sure they're lined up. And then we're going to go into that last stitch again. I always like to double stitch in the last stitch. I'm not sure why. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew across each of the next 8 row end stitches. That's 1, 2. Now the row end stitches are a little hard to see, so what I do is I know that I see these grooves. So this is 2 rows, 2 rows. So here we have our 2 rows, because that one row is like right in the base of those stitches. So here's 2, 4, 6, and 8. So you can just grab 1 or 2 loops, it doesn't matter. I like to grab maybe 2 loops of yarn because I like that nice and secure. So try to make sure you keep that matched up. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And when I get to that 8th stitch, again, I always double stitch. I always redo that stitch. I pull up a loop, and then I just take my hook through that loop and pull tight. So now what I like to do is I like to go ahead and weave that end in. So I'm just going to go under some of these stitches. And now I think I'm going to go this way because it's easier to see the stitches to weave under them when you go on the side. I really like to secure my ends really well and then I'm just going to come back through. And then I'm going to fasten off. So then you're going to have this piece of yarn here from, we gathered the toe area and there was that extra strand of yarn. So you want to go ahead and thread that through your yarn needle and then go ahead and just weave it on the wrong side as we're weaving in our ends, and get all your ends weaved in. And again, I like to go through, you know, as many stitches as possible, at least 6 to 8. And then you want to come back through. Skip a stitch and then come back through. And then I'm just going to fasten that off. And now we're ready to turn our slipper right side out. So just turn it right side out. And that is how we do the toe, and that's how we do the heel. Now it's up to you whether you just want to do a single crochet border around your slipper, or if you prefer to do the high top like I do. And I really suggest you put the high top on because it makes such a difference of keeping those slippers on. So let me go ahead and test the slipper. We're going to see how it fits on our foot. And then we're just going to pull it up over the heel. And that's what it looks like right now. So again, it's up to you. You can leave it this way or you can add the border. So let me grab my hook and we'll continue and put the top on our slipper. So now we're going to go ahead and start our top edging around our slipper. So you're going to go to the back of the slipper right where your heel seam is. So now I'm just going to join my yarn. I already have my yarn on my hook. I just tied a double knot. I'm going to insert right into the first stitch on the left side of my joining seam, and I'm just going to slip stitch through that stitch and through the loop on my hook. I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to single crochet into that same row end stitch. Now I'm just going to work 1 single crochet in each row end stitch until I come within 3 row end stitches from that center point. Again, we're just working 1 single crochet in each row end stitch, and if you're not sure, you can just pull your work and you can see these holes open right up for your row end stitches. And again, we're working 1 single crochet in each stitch across to within 3 row end stitches from that center point. Now when you're working over, make sure you keep checking to make sure you don't go too far. So let's check our work. Here's my center point. So when you're looking at your work, I'm just going to show you here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 row end stitches. So we still have to work in 2 more. Single crochet into the next stitch, single crochet into the next row end stitch, and then when you look at your work, you're going to see 1, 2, and 3, and then here's that center seam. Now I have this kind of crunched up since I'm crocheting. So again, you're going to see 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you're working on a bigger slipper, the same thing, you're just going to single crochet until you get to within 3 row end stitches of that front center seam. So now we're going to yarn over. You're going to skip the next 2 row end stitches, insert into the next row end stitch, and you're going to work 2 double crochet. 1, yarn over, insert back into that same stitch, work a second double crochet. So when you look at your slipper, you work 2 double crochet on the right side of that seam. Now we're going to work 2 double crochet on the left side of the seam. So yarn over, insert into the next row end stitch right on the left side of that joining seam, work 2 double crochet into that same stitch. 1, insert back into that same stitch, work a double crochet. And when you look at your work, you can see how that helps take that V up, and it's making that a little bit more even around the top of your slipper. So now, because we worked those 2 double crochet, we want to skip the next 2 row end stitches, and we're going to work a single crochet into the 3rd row end stitch from that center, from the last stitch you worked. So skip the next 2 row end stitches, insert into the 3rd row end stitch from the last stitch made, work a single crochet. Single crochet in each row end stitch around until you get to the beginning of the round. And again, you can just pull your work and those holes will open right up. Now you can modify and do the top band. If you want to do it a different way, you can go ahead and create your own top band if you prefer something else. So now I'm back over to the seam, so I'm just going to insert right into the right side of that seam, do my last stitch. Now when you get to the end of round 1, you need to count your stitches and you need to have an even number of stitches. Now I have an odd number, so I'm going to add 1 more stitch into the last stitch around. So depending on how you sewed your slipper and how you put it together, then you need to adjust this round so you have an even number of stitches. So again, I have an odd number. I need to add 1 more stitch to this last stitch. So I'm just going to add another stitch in my last stitch. And now I have an even number of stitches. So now I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch into that first stitch and join my round together. Now we're ready to begin round 2. We're going to chain 1, insert back into that same beginning stitch, work a single crochet. We're going to work 1 single crochet in each single crochet around until you come to that first double crochet. So the double crochets are right at the center front of your slipper. Now this video I'm trying to do so anyone who makes a custom size slipper can still follow the video. So that is why I'm not really giving a stitch count right now, because if you're making a larger size, you need to just make sure you have an even number of stitches. So I'm going to continue single crocheting down to the front center of the slipper where I find my first of 4 double crochets. So I'm almost there. So here is my last single crochet, and then you can see how that longer stitch comes up. That's our first double crochet. So I'm just going to single crochet into this single crochet. And then when you look at your work, you're going to have 4 double crochet going across the top front of your slipper. We're going to work 1 double crochet in each of the next 4 double crochet stitches. Yarn over, insert into that next double crochet, work a double crochet. That's 1. Double crochet into the next double crochet stitch. That's 2. double crochet into the next double crochet stitch. That's 3. Double crochet into the next double crochet stitch, and that's 4. Now we're just going to single crochet in each remaining single crochet around our work. Now for this round, your stitch count is going to be exactly the same as round 1, so your stitch count will not change. And again, it depends what size slipper you're making of what your stitch count is going to be. As long as it is an even number, you're going to be fine. Because when we work the rest of the top edging, you need to have an even number for the pattern to come out correctly. Now before you join, go ahead, you can do a double stitch count, just count your stitches and make sure that's an even number, and then go ahead and join with a slip stitch under the top 2 loops of that beginning single crochet. And round 2 is finished, and when you look at your slipper, let me take my hook out, you can see how the top looks pretty uniform. It's the same height, and we just filled in that V at the beginning center of our slipper. Now we're ready to begin round 3 of our top edging, and we're going to begin with the chain 3. Now I'm going to bend the slipper down to try to make it easier for you to see what I'm doing with my stitches. We're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and this is going to count as the first half double crochet plus a chain 1. We're going to skip the next stitch and work a half double crochet into the next stitch. Yarn over, skip the next stitch, insert into the next stitch, work a half double crochet. We're going to chain 1, we're going to yarn over, skip the next stitch, insert into the next stitch, work a half double crochet. You're going to chain 1, yarn over, skip the next stitch, insert into the next stitch, work a half double crochet. And we're just going to repeat that around, ending with the chain 1 and skipping the last stitch. So I'm going to work it right with you. You're going to chain 1, yarn over, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, yarn over, skip the next stitch, insert into the next stitch, work a half double crochet. Chain 1, yarn over, skip the next stitch, insert into the next stitch, work a half double crochet. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, insert into the next stitch, work a half double crochet, and I'm going under the top 2 loops of each stitch that I'm working in. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next stitch, and I just passed my center point. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next stitch. Very simple repeat pattern. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next. And I know I'm repeating myself a lot. We only have a few to go. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, insert into the next, work a half double crochet. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, half double crochet into the next stitch. I'm over to my last stitch. Now it looks like 2 stitches, but remember this chain 3 is part of this stitch, so we're just going to chain 1, skip this next stitch, and you're going to insert into the second chain of that beginning chain 3 and slip stitch. Now I'm going to fasten off. So now we're ready to begin round 4, and we're starting each round at the back heel of the slipper. Again, I'm going to fold the slipper under so you can see what I'm doing better. So to join the yarn for round 4, we're going to skip this beginning chain where we joined, and we're going over to the next chain 1 space, but we're going to join underneath it into this single crochet stitch. So when we're working our stitches around, we're going into the stitch, and then we're working our stitches right over top and around the chain 1 space. So again, right now I'm just going to join my yarn. I'm going to insert into the single crochet underneath that next chain 1 space. And then I'm just going to join with the slip stitch. Yarn over, pull through that space. You're going right around the chain 1 space, and you're going right through the loop on your hook. We're going to start, and we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And this beginning chain 3 counts as our first half double crochet and a chain 1. We're going to skip the next half double crochet of the current row, and we're going to work a half double crochet into the single crochet 1 row below the next chain 1 space. So yarn over, insert into that single crochet underneath the chain 1 space, work a half double crochet. You're going to chain 1. You're going to skip the next half double crochet of the current row. You're going to yarn over, insert into the next corresponding single crochet underneath that chain 1 space, work a half double crochet. And that's what we're going to do around our slipper. Chain 1, yarn over, skip the next half double crochet, insert into the next corresponding single crochet underneath that chain 1 space, work a half double crochet. So chain 1, skip the next half double crochet, work a half double crochet into the next single crochet 1 row below that next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next half double crochet into the next corresponding single crochet underneath the chain 1 space. And that's what we're going to do around our slipper. So I know it's really tedious me repeating myself with each step, so I'm just going to go ahead and work it around. I'll say it one more time. You're going to chain 1, yarn over, skip the next half double crochet, insert into the next single crochet 1 round below the next chain 1 space, work a half double crochet. So again, I'm just going to work this right around with you. If you need help, you can just click on the video, just backtrack a little bit, and you can watch me do it and tell you exactly how to do it by clicking back on the video. I believe I just went by my halfway point, so I'm working on the other side of my slipper, and we're just going to work around until we get back to the beginning of the round. And if you hear all that background noise, I have to try to remind everybody I live right by a major road. It's right outside my house. And I try to film when it's quiet, but it's getting that time of day where work traffic is really going up and down the road. So I'm very sorry about all the background noise if you can hear it. So we're getting close to the beginning of our round. Now I just worked my last half double crochet in the single crochet under the last remaining chain one space. So then we have this half double crochet at the end that we're going to skip. So you're going to chain one, you're going to skip that last half double crochet, and you're going to come over and you're going to join into the second chain of that beginning chain three. So insert right into the center chain, just count up 1, 2, and then slip stitch your round together, and then we're going to fasten off our white. Now I'm just letting my ends hang. I'll weave them in when I'm all done with working this upper edging. So now we have one more round to go. I'm going to grab this slipper. We're just going to grab our red, and then we're just going to finish the top of our slipper by filling in between the white and adding this top edging onto our slipper all at the same time. So go ahead and grab your red and let's get started on the last round of our slipper. So I have my red attached to my hook, and again I just used a double knot, and I used the same method. Now if you have a different way of joining your yarn, then by all means please use your method. I'm going to insert right into the top of the joining stitch right where we fastened off, and I'm going right into that same chain of that ending chain right where you fastened off. I'm going to slip stitch, yarn over, pull through that chain, and pull through the loop on your hook. You're going to chain one, and we're going to single crochet into this very same beginning chain where we joined our yarn. So now we're going to work a half double crochet into the next corresponding stitch below the next chain one space. Now with this stitch pattern, the half double crochet, the top of that stitch is coming over to this portion of the trim. So it may be a little confusing when you're trying to get your hook under those top two loops. You're going to have that stitch in your way. So you just have to make sure you're going into the right space. And when you look at these stitches, you're going to have two loops on top and then that one loop underneath. You got to make sure that you're going under both of the top loops and you have that one strand of yarn underneath your hook. So let's go ahead and begin. We're going to half double crochet into the next corresponding stitch below that chain one space. You're working into the top of the stitch, and then you're working right around that chain one space. So this is where you need to pull your stitch back, find the top of that half double crochet, and make sure you're going under the top two loops and you keep that one loop underneath your hook. You're going to single crochet into the top of that stitch. Half double crochet into the next corresponding stitch one round below that chain one space. Single crochet into the top of that half double crochet. Just make sure that you're going underneath the top two loops and you have that one strand underneath your hook. Work a single crochet. Half double crochet into the next stitch one round below the chain one space. Single crochet into the top of the next half double crochet, and this just is a little bit harder to do getting in that stitch, but it's not that hard. You just have to be careful what you're doing. Half double crochet into the next stitch one round below the next chain one space. Work a half double crochet. Single crochet into the top of the next half double crochet stitch of the current row. And I'm just going to continue working that around. So I'll explain it one more time, and then I'm just going to go ahead and work it around. You're going to yarn over, insert into the next corresponding stitch one round below the next chain one space, and work a half double crochet. Then you're going to single crochet under the top two loops of that next stitch of the current row. So now I'm just going to go ahead and work my stitches around. And again, if you need help, just click back on the video. So I'm a little over halfway. Again, we're working a half double crochet into the stitch right below the chain one space. And then we're just working a single crochet under the top two loops of that next stitch on the current row. And we're just repeating that around to the beginning of the round. So just a few more stitches to go and our slipper's going to be done. Now this top edging might be a little more complicated for a new crocheter, but if you take your time, it's just a nice finishing touch to the slipper. If you don't want to do all this skipping stitches and going underneath the chain one spaces, you can always decide to just do a single crochet rounds across the top. You don't have to do this border. It's just a simple basic slipper that you can add your own personal touch to it and kind of design it to suit yourself. So I'm getting over to the last chain one space. So I'm over to the last chain one space. I'm going to end with my half double crochet into that stitch one round below the chain one space. And you can see I'm back over to that beginning single crochet. So we're just going to insert our hook under the top two loops of our beginning single crochet and slip stitch our round together. I'm going to go ahead and fasten off my yarn, and I like to have a little bit longer length just to make it easier to weave in those ends. So I'm going to go ahead and weave in my ends, and I'll be back and show you the slipper. I weaved in all my ends. This is what your finished slipper will look like, and again, very easy to customize the slipper to any size you wish. So this is what it looks like up close. And again, after you sew your toe together and your heel, you can do a different edging across the top of your slipper. You don't have to do this particular edging. You can customize that to suit yourself. And then this is what the bottom of the slipper looks like. The back heel. So just a very easy slipper made using a rectangle. So now all you have to do is click back on the video and start all over again to make your second slipper so you have a pair of slippers. I hope you enjoyed crocheting with me today. If you liked today's video, please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're not a subscriber so you don't miss any of the crochet fun. And if you like to cook, please check out my new channel, Creative Grandma's Kitchen, where I prepare simple foods using simple ingredients. I'd love to see you in the kitchen as well. So until next time, stay inspired and happy crocheting, everyone.